And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PSBTA Technical Solutions webinar series. My name is Martha Ellis, and I am the Executive Director of the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association, or the PSBTA. For those of you who may not be familiar with our association, our primary objective is to work as a FirstNet end user advocate for all first responders and service providers who support response, mitigation, and recovery efforts during emergencies. We've created this webinar series in an effort to bring you the most current and accurate information on all aspects of broadband use for public safety personnel. As an association, it is also important that we hear from you. Your feedback and input is critical to the ongoing development and evolution of FirstNet. Because of the relationships that we've developed over the years, we're able to direct your questions and suggestions back to those responsible for network, hardware, and application development, helping them focus their efforts on what's important to you. So before we get started today, I have a couple of housekeeping items. All attendees have been automatically muted to reduce background noise. Any questions should be submitted directly to us through the questions function, which is located at the bottom of the menu on the right side of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of our presentation. We will attempt to answer as many questions as possible, yet still stay within our allotted hour. We will follow up with any questions that we are unable to answer or get to during the live portion of the webinar after we are finished today. Should further questions come up when the webinar is over, we will also provide emails for the presenters at the end so you can follow up at your convenience. Today's webinar is a post-incident analysis of the Salt Lake earthquake that struck last March. Our presenters were directly involved with the response and recovery efforts, both as first responders, as well as providing oversight for the FirstNet broadband network. I too was in Salt Lake City the morning of the earthquake, and my first concern, other than my family crystal that sits on my shelves, was public response, as we were in the throes of the COVID pandemic panic at our local stores. The one thing I was not concerned about, however, was the emergency response. I have spent years working in this community as a first responder, and I had great confidence in the organization and coordination that we had practiced over the years for this very event. And you will see that all of the preparation as well was well rewarded, as the professionalism and emergency planning truly served this community well. Reliable communications is a critical component of successfully responding to these types of large, multidiscipline, multi-jurisdictional incidents. As an association, it is important to us that all public safety personnel know that there is a purpose-built broadband network available exclusively to them with FirstNet. And equally as important is that everyone understands why being on FirstNet matters. Today, we're going to hear from Battalion Chief Dustin Dern with the Unified Fire Authority, David Herrman with the Salt Lake City Fire Department, Garett Doyle with the FirstNet built with AT&T, and Tracey Murdock from the First Responders Network Authority. They're going to brief on the incident, response, and communications during this event, in addition to discussing the framework and the vision of FirstNet, our nation's fully designated public safety broadband network. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Dustin, David, Garett, and Tracey to begin our webinar on communications in complex incidents, the Salt Lake City earthquake during COVID-19 pandemic.
Hey, good morning. This is Dustin. Thanks for the introduction. I'm here to just give a brief overview of our response to COVID-19 and our incident within the incident, like you mentioned, the earthquake on March 18th. With that said, I'd like to give just a quick overview of our organization. So Unified Fire Authority is made up of 694 employees, serving an estimated 422,000 residents in 15 municipalities within Salt Lake County. And we serve one municipality located in Utah County, which is Eagle Mountain. We're a full service fire agency, so we provide fire suppression, advanced life support, transportation, technical rescue, hazmat, and all the other functions that come with managing a full service fire department. Additionally, which is an interesting piece to our organization, is we staff and manage emergency management for Salt Lake County. That is part of an agreement that our organization reached in 2004. It's a 50-year agreement with the county that we will manage and support the Emergency Communication Center for Salt Lake County. So to start with our response, about mid-March when we started to see the impacts of COVID-19 within the U.S., our organization with Salt Lake County staffed the ECC to a level 2 response. Many of our personnel helped staff the ECC, and they've continued to staff that facility through today. Additionally, our organization stood up a task force. This task force's main objective initially was to begin gathering situation and put procedures and protocols in place to both serve the communities we are in and do that safely in considering COVID-19. Shortly after the task force was initiated, we started to see an uptick in those cases, and we stood up a Type 3 incident management team, which the task force rolled into that team, and we brought in additional personnel and staffed additional positions. Throughout a majority of the early days, we were running on a 48-hour planning cycle and operations period. And with that, we had a number of communication needs in doing so, both within the ECC and our stations. And recently, we've transitioned to a 7-day-a-week operational period, and that began on April 29th. Like was mentioned earlier, on March 18th, we experienced an earthquake of 5.7 magnitude. The epicenter was 3.7 miles northeast of Magna, Utah, which is a municipality that we provide service to. Main Street Magna is a community that was established in the early 1900s, and many of the structures from the early 1900s still stand or are occupied in that area. So within this incident, obviously this created a difficult situation with dealing with COVID-19 and this earthquake. So our coordination response was needed between the ECC, our operations personnel, and then our incident management team. Immediately after the earthquake, our ECC was elevated to a level 1 staffing, and it continues to be there today. This is just a couple quick pictures of some of the damage from the places that were hardest hit in our response area. As you can see, a parapet wall had fallen off of that structure. In addition, that was another incident that was caused by the earthquake is we had a substantial hazmat response. We cover emergency services and fire suppression for Kennecott, Utah Copper. And near Utah 201 and 202, which is near Saldair and I-80, there was a reported chemical leak on Kennecott property. That chemical leak was initially reported to be chlorine, and we began diving into what that meant for our response and how we were going to mitigate this incident. The initial projections from coming from the Emergency Communication Center at the hazmat desk were predicting that with predicted weather that we were going to need to evacuate the 2,700 residents of Magna. With that said, that created a huge communication challenge for both our operational folks in the field managing the hazmat incident, and then the interagency preparations that were going to be needed to move that many people that quickly, and keeping the potential risk to COVID-19 at the forefront. So with that, as we dove into the incident, it was later found that the leaking product was hydrochloric acid that was completely contained within an emergency catch basin, and we were able to stand down the evacuations, and we moved to the recovery phase in that and turned that incident over to Kennecott for cleanup. So with that said, and the potential for this hazmat incident, mutual aid and automatic aid response was key in our communications with those agencies. We had our partner agencies of Salt Lake City, Park City, and Lehigh hazmat companies respond to the scene to help us start to work through that incident. We had really good communications throughout the incident. Our agency was able to conduct their uplift of FirstNet pretty early on. Like I said, the earthquake hit us at 7:09, and our uplift was completed minutes after that. The biggest improvement we saw to our communications was the data usage for the mobile data within our heavy apparatus out in the field. Marked improvement was reported from the companies responding. Just a brief overview of a few things that went well for us. We didn't have any communications issues with our dispatch center, Valley Emergency Communications Center. All our mobile radio base stations and handheld radios functioned well throughout the entire incident, and we had no radio issues. There was a marked improvement, like I said, both in data and cell phone usage once our uplift was complete. However, we did run into a few Wi-Fi related calling problems where our phones in some of our facilities were trying to move between cell service and Wi-Fi calling. And then the uplift also helped with our operational platforms, our internet-based operational systems that responders use in the field. So just to conclude, some of the continued practices and lessons learned that our organization has found, both from COVID-19 and the most recent earthquake, is that organizational engagement early was a success for us. Being very fluid was key in our COVID response. Early on, things were changing daily, CDC recommendations and whatnot, if not hourly, and our organization and crews were very fluid in changing the way they responded. We were able to meet with many partner agencies and then also agencies on the coast that were weeks ahead of us and helped us develop our procedures and our response. Standing up our INT early and getting our communications in line helped us communicate that critical information, planning and the logistical support. We had a great stockpile of PPE necessary, which alleviated some of the concern of our responders, and that was a success for us. Additionally, the planning, coordination, and relationships with automatic aid and our mutual aid organizations in conjunction with the ECC was key for that. And then our relationships with the health department and University of Utah Health. Related to the earthquake, our dispatch handling was critical. We were able to rapidly handle the increased 911 calls and prioritize those calls efficiently. The cross-staff usage of our apparatus, like I mentioned earlier, the data usage and having data available allowed us to staff up those ambulances through our automated staffing programs quickly and make that happen to get more available apparatus out to handle the call influx. Our ECC and COVID task force integrated very cleanly, both operationally and on the communications end. And we were able to work directly out of the Emergency Communications Center. Lastly, we do have some policies and procedures updates that will require related to not only response, but also communications within the organization. One note was that many of our chief officers in the field, we have FirstNet phones assigned, but some of those phones weren't within apparatus, and we need to get that dialed in so that when we have that uplift, we have that technology available to us. And then the operations, just taking control of our resources, helped us prioritize cleanly. So that's the end of my presentation, just a brief snapshot of our operational response. And I'd like to turn it over to Dave.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Herrman. I am the Senior Business Analyst for Salt Lake City Fire Department, focused on technology. Here's my contact information in case you have any questions after this presentation. Incidentally, this presentation can be viewed live on the internet via this website here, slcfire.net. I am going to kind of segue on the UFA response and kind of talk about things from an IT and communications perspective. Just a little bit about me. I again do general technology, so I handle communications and websites and records management. I was a former dispatch director. I did that for a number of years, and then former emergency manager for Salt Lake City International Airport. This mentions that I'm a FirstNet enthusiast, which is absolutely true. Several years ago, we had a unique experience where candidates for president, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, were in Salt Lake City at the same time. We had 14,000 people show up for a Bernie Sanders rally, and Incident Command indicated that during that time frame, they could not make or place a phone call, and data was sparse. So we determined that we needed a better, more robust solution, which offered priority and preemption. One of the things I also like about FirstNet is it has this very tasty dashboard available to us, which gives us the ability to set priority for our first responders, and also gives us real-time alerts if there is a potential problem with the network. So before the earthquake, we were in full COVID-19 planning and response. Basically, our primary focus was on protection of firefighters and logistics, making sure that they had ample PPE from our stockpile, and also looking at replenishing our stockpile through our contracts, our state contracts. We were also looking at reduced workforce considerations. In other words, if there were firefighters who came down with COVID, what would we do under those circumstances to make sure the public was safe? There were kind of four major things that we focused on in terms of preparation. The first one is we started collecting data regarding suspected COVID-19 cases, so we could determine, basically what firefighters could look for when they responded into certain areas to ensure they weren't, to ensure they had the proper protection as they went into those situations. We also started developing a heat map. This is a map showing suspected COVID-19 cases. These are typically not confirmed, but it's basically to give us an idea of where clustering occurs. Incidentally, this map that you see here is pretty consistent with the maps that have been released by Salt Lake County as far as where confirmed COVID cases are occurring. We also stepped up our emergency operations center. We basically activated it at a fairly low level and got the staff members together on a periodic basis to go ahead and perform coordination activities. Finally, and maybe most importantly to some of our folks, we started documentation. Basically, if a firefighter suspected they were exposed to COVID-19, we basically wanted to know about it and document it due to potential insurance possibilities. On the staffing side of things, basically the workforce kind of reflected what we saw in our community. The very last time I went to Costco, basically back in early March, people looked fearful. There was kind of an anxiety permeating our community. And the same thing was true of the workforce as we began to cancel our events and as our support staff began to quarantine. So it's under this situation that suddenly we had a significant earthquake occur in Salt Lake City. As mentioned, it was March 18th at about 7:10 in the morning, 5.7 magnitude, which is not insignificant. And I've got I had a video basically here that's not going to play, unfortunately, due to the bandwidth here. But essentially, although there wasn't, the devastation you might see on the news, basically it did rattle a lot of our people as we tried to, do our response. So overall, there were 50,000 power outages in Salt Lake City, which compounded our emergency response, which I'll talk about in a sec. The hardest hit city department was actually the Salt Lake City International Airport, which was closed for a period of time due to significant flooding and to basically check out the runways to make sure that planes could land on the tarmac safely. Our city and county building, a historic icon in downtown Salt Lake City, was evacuated for a period of time. We have, as a city, have spent a great deal of time and money on reinforcing that structure. And I'm pleased to report that basically there was no significant damage to that building, and we were able to move back in within a few days. Additionally, public transportation, namely tracks in downtown Salt Lake City, was impacted. I pulled a report showing the calls that Salt Lake City Fire Department received over this period of time, 260% increase in call volume, everything from natural gas to bogus notifier alarms to significant water problems throughout the community, and even a few people who were stuck in elevators due to power outages in facilities when apparently their backup generation did not kick in. On the comms and IT, well, actually backing up just a little bit, the fire crews basically went into what their training dictates. They went ahead and started doing windshield assessments, looking around for damage in the community and starting to notate that. Our EOC went to its highest level of operations, which was really, really cool to watch. One of the challenges with the COVID situation is that our emergency response was partially virtualized. In other words, because we had a large number of staff members in Salt Lake City government in quarantine, a lot of our activities occurred basically not face-to-face. And yeah, actually a big chunk of my activities during that day were actually done at home. I spent 4.5 hours at home just doing sheer work until I actually made it in. The first thing that I did when I woke up that morning and took care of the family was looked at our communications infrastructure. I thankfully had a staff member on site at the public safety building, and he reported no problems with land mobile radio. After the fact, we did some reporting and determined that we had a couple of system busies, meaning that people couldn't actually communicate over the radio, but it wasn't a big deal necessarily. That being said, I decided to go ahead and do an uplift request with FirstNet. Uplifting basically means taking some of your staff members, those with FirstNet phones, and giving them higher priority on the network. This is most especially relevant to kind of secondary FirstNet users, those who have personal lines of service, or those organizations with a kind of a secondary emergency response, such as public utilities and public services. It was after the uplift request that I started noticing some network connection challenges. So the first thing that happened where I noticed that there was a problem of some kind was on the rumor control side of things. My wife actually came running upstairs and she said it was all over Facebook that a major 10.0 earthquake was imminent, and should we, do anything about it? I contacted the EOC and checked around with my resources, and no, there was no indication that basically that was going to occur, but the genie was out of the bottle. And basically what we started doing was trying to post information on the Salt Lake City website. Now, this website is actually connected to the state of Utah emergency website, and due to network congestion on the internet, where so many people were trying to gain access to that website, it actually took our main communications vehicle to the public down for approximately 2 hours. What that basically necessitated was spinning up our backup website, which we had to dust it off a little bit, but we were able to get that up and operational within a very short period of time. One of the things that I was also heavily engaged with was damage assessments. Basically, the technique that we had used previously for damage assessments didn't seem like it was actually going to be viable for this particular situation. So I was tasked with putting together an online form essentially. And I also was trying to make contact with our partners in Esri and in the private sector to get some assistance for some of the geocoding that we would need for this. And on my FirstNet phone, it worked great, responder to responder. But as I tried to contact, someone who was not on the FirstNet network, basically a private company in another state, I did a couple of times receive your call cannot be completed as dialed at this point in time. So there are some outcome things that I'd like to talk about. First of all, I know this presentation is kind of gives the impression that this was a really bad situation because we had compounded events. We had a pandemic and then also an earthquake at the same time. This actually was easier for us the earthquake was because our EOC was already activated. The people already knew where to go. They had their tools ready to go. And so actually it was just add water and stir pretty much. This to me suggests that we in government and in emergency management, can learn from this. And basically, I would stand up the EOC if I were in that position, on a fairly regular basis, maybe quarterly, even for practice. After the earthquake occurred, I sent out a survey to our EOC staff members and I asked them about their communications related stuff. They indicated that, as far as the tools that they were provided by, us as a city, there weren't any or really any significant problems. However, we had 3 of our remote EOC staff members that indicated that their internet went offline because of power outages in the community. So they could still communicate over the phone, but they couldn't actually do much else at that point in time. On the comm side of things, one of the learning experiences I had comes also from that survey. I asked our EOC folks basically, what did you utilize to coordinate response during the earthquake situation? In emergency management, we always talk about land mobile radio, which is, it's arguably the most robust and the most survivable system if everything goes down. But what this shows me is that our traditional tools for normal business were actually the ones that were mostly used during earthquake response: cellular, SMS, and email. What that suggests to me is that we need to ensure that we have robust, cellular, LTE, and data communications for not only routine situations, but emergency situations. As I mentioned before, my FirstNet stuff worked great, but FirstNet trying to dial to another potentially non-cellular network was challenging. Therefore, I'd like to reinforce the use of WPS or wireless priority service as an augmentation to FirstNet. Again, FirstNet to FirstNet's going to work great, but you probably will need this if you want to contact non-governmental organizations. On the website, no brainer, we need to have our redundant website ready to go. And actually, we have put in a request to our website host telling them they need to make our main public website more robust and survivable, and they are in the process of doing that now. With the survey also, basically email was used principally or by virtually all of the EOC members. We were hosting our email basically on a server farm here locally in Salt Lake City. And this situation has reinforced the notion that we need to move our email to the cloud to make sure it's universally available in the event that our main server farm in Salt Lake City goes down. So Salt Lake City Fire is aggressively moving our employees to the Microsoft Office 365 cloud. That's pretty much it as far as my presentation. Thank you so much for your participation. And if you have any questions, you can call me directly or you can email me. Now I'm going to turn the time over to Garett Doyle. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. We are going to be moving on to the piece on FirstNet. And so as soon as I get this up, okay. Well, I'm Garett Doyle. I manage the FirstNet program for AT&T in the Rocky Mountain region. I reside in Golden, Colorado, which is coincidentally close to the USGS National Earthquake Information Center just down the street. So on March 18th, I was just getting my first cup of coffee at 7 a.m. when my FirstNet phone started going off with texts, emails, and phone calls, all with a variety of reports of the Salt Lake City earthquake. Frankly, I had kind of planned to be spending a significant part of my day on COVID-19 preparation and response, as we had been working on many of those as test facilities, quarantine locations, and other requests were coming in on a regular basis. Today, I'll be providing a perspective on how FirstNet functioned during the Salt Lake earthquake, as well as supporting at the same time a regional and national response for COVID-19. While many of you are likely familiar with FirstNet, let me do a quick level set for those that may not be familiar. In 2017, AT&T was selected by the federal government to establish a private-public partnership to build and manage FirstNet, the only nationwide communication platform dedicated to America's first responders and the public safety community. FirstNet was commissioned by Congress as this single nationwide broadband network, really in response to the communication failures that had occurred during the 9/11 terrorist attack. Well, FirstNet is here. Frankly, what was an idea and sometimes slideware and a concept that we discussed years ago is now available. FirstNet is providing this essential communication to over 1 million different devices, connecting more than 12,000 different public safety agencies across the U.S. First responders every day are using FirstNet for their voice, video, email, text, data communication. I want to focus on 2 key elements of FirstNet. We won't have time to talk about all the details of FirstNet, but I want to talk about 2 as we consider the complex communication challenges that occurred during the COVID-19 and the Salt Lake earthquake. The first is priority and preemption, and then the other one we'll talk about in a minute is the deployable program. First, priority and preemption is absolutely critical, especially in times of need, like we have talked about today with the earthquake. We call this first priority. FirstNet was really designed to maintain connectivity during these complex events and these critical incidents. First priority works on all FirstNet devices. That includes a smartphone, a mobile data terminal, a body camera, a tablet, even wearables. FirstNet has priority and preemption on all traffic, whether it's video, data, messaging, and voice services. As you can imagine, we had really 2 complex events going on simultaneously, and they both provided different unique challenges. COVID-19 was a widespread event. Because of the shelter-in-place orders across the country, AT&T saw an immediate 20% jump in data traffic across the network, literally overnight. Whereas the Salt Lake earthquake was a more localized event. Just after 7 a.m. on March 18th in Salt Lake City, everyone started picking up their phones, calling their family to let them know they were okay, or they were sharing pictures of damage or challenges, or going live on Facebook or YouTube with videos of the earthquake. On top of that, as somebody already mentioned, there was a significant power outage. So many home broadband services were down because their home routers were no longer connected. So without even realizing it, many people were failing over to their smartphones as their primary internet connection. Priority and preemption across all devices and all traffic is essential during these complex events and incidents. It's even that much more important when we have multiple events going on at the same time. The second element of FirstNet that we're going to look at is the FirstNet deployable program. Cellular providers have had deployables available for years. What is different, though, is with the FirstNet program, there's a dedicated library, a lending library of these dedicated deployables that are available for FirstNet users to make requests when they need them. The 76 FirstNet deployables have been called upon hundreds of times to support first responders during emergent events, whether that's a search and rescue, a wildland fire, or other weather-related hurricane or tornadoes. They've also been used to support special events. We think of last summer, even in Utah, with the Golden Spike celebration, and most recently in my backyard with the U.S. Air Force Academy graduation. Deployables are great tools. However, it takes more than just technology and equipment to support first responders. It is all about people. It's about a program. It's about having a group ready, on the ready to support them. So when in 2019, the FirstNet Response Operations Group, this group, including myself, responded to over 500 deployable requests across the U.S. But that's not where the ROG team starts. It's not during the incident. It actually is before the incident. The FirstNet ROG team engaged Salt Lake City way before the earthquake. We came back in 2019, met with public safety leaders and EOC members to review the FirstNet deployable program, to establish communication, to make sure that this was a seamless request process. So on March 18th, the FirstNet ROG program was near instantly notified of the Salt Lake earthquake, both internally by our own network monitoring as well as by customers letting us know that the earthquake had occurred. Immediately, the deployable team was pre-alerted and prepped in anticipation of a deployable request. In addition, the network team began immediately assessing the overall health of the network in the greater Salt Lake City area. We received a report from users that they were experiencing some issues. We immediately began to investigate the situation. A FirstNet deployable request was immediately made. The ROG team immediately started to send for the deployable and get the team prepped to deploy. At the same time, the local network team reviewed the concerns and looked at what real-time network adjustments could be made to enhance service. In addition, as it was previously mentioned, the public safety agencies also uplifted their users to the highest priority level. As a result of the changes that were made, performance was further enhanced, and ultimately the deployable request was canceled. The SATCO turned around and returned to the depot as it wasn't needed. When the earthquake hit Salt Lake, everyone was still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Back in January, FirstNet received our first request for support as a result of the pandemic. Since then, we have deployed 50 different deployable units for the COVID. These have gone to EOCs, temporary medical facilities, quarantine centers, and test locations. While the deployable requests are certainly important, what often goes without notice is the other work that happens in the background. We did over 4,750 network assessments related to COVID-19, working with state, local, tribal, and federal requests as they were strategically placing testing locations, setting up temporary medical facilities, as well as staging quarantine locations. Keep in mind, other non-COVID-19 requests continued to come in simultaneously, including the Salt Lake earthquake, but also other weather-related search and rescue efforts and weather-related requests. I thought it would be good just to highlight some of the COVID-19 responses that were going on around the United States at the time. For example, we had a deployment request for the Port of Los Angeles with the USNS Mercy, out in New York with the USNS Comfort. We even had our first deployable request in Guam. We also supported a patient transfer staging area back in New York, also supporting a key medical facility out in Roseville, California. And as we move around the country, we also supported several testing sites that had been set up in New Jersey and New York and Connecticut and others around the country. Here's one that we did back in Georgia as a quarantine location was being set up there. In addition, we worked with both tribes, states, and other federal EOCs setting up and making sure that they had the communications that they needed. I think it's kind of interesting on this is not only do we provide deployables, we also went in and enhanced some in-building coverage in order to facilitate the communication needs that they had at that EOC. As I mentioned, there were some non-COVID emergencies and other planned events that were going on at the time. We had requests that came in for related to a tornado in Texas, as well as another request in Georgia. And as you may have heard, Vice President Pence, without much notice, was the key speaker at the U.S. Air Force Academy graduation in Colorado Springs. And so we were able to support public safety in that deployment as well. Well, I know this didn't happen during the recent earthquake, but I thought it would be great to just highlight one of the planned events and show you the deployable that would have shown up in Salt Lake if it was needed, as we supported the Golden Spike event, which was the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad. There was a celebration out in Northwest Utah, and we supported the National Guard as there was over 30,000 people showing up at this remote event. Well, as we conclude, reliable, dedicated communications are absolutely vital for frontline complex events, incidents, whether it's an earthquake or whether it's a pandemic. Unlike a commercial network, FirstNet is a government mandated, it's inspected, it's supervised. AT&T is held accountable for keeping first responder lines of communication open with dedicated mission critical solutions that really is modernizing public safety. We appreciate the opportunity to present today. Our next presenter is Tracey Murdock with the First Responder Network Authority. Tracey?
Well, thank you, Garrett. And yes, I'm Tracey. I'm with FirstNet Authority, and my job is to work with public safety to as many agencies that I can, that will listen to me to hear what they have to say about their network. That FirstNet is a purpose-built network because public safety needed it, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. I too was in Salt Lake City on that morning when the earth jolted, having just recently finished up talking to a group of stakeholders, and it was something. And what was even more unnerving were the aftershocks. And so having experienced firsthand how important that communication is, that it's a great pleasure to talk with you today. I want to start with saying that why is FirstNet even here? And just to remind everybody that way back, that the commercial networks were not meeting what public safety needed. And public safety stakeholders lobbied Congress saying, please help us. We need a better way. We learned it the hard way from the 9/11 attacks. And it was again emphasized during that 9/11 commission report that yes, public safety does indeed need a modern way to communicate. The commercial sectors are not meeting that, and the government needs to partner with industry to make this purpose-built, deliberate, nationwide public safety wireless network. And so in 2012, FirstNet was created, and ever since then, we have been working closely with public safety to hear what's important in their network. What is it that we need? What is it they need to keep the public safe? And you saw it here, you heard it today from Dustin and Dave about that priority network, how important data is, just that we're changing in the way we communicate, and FirstNet is there. And it's because of all the voices of the stakeholders that are guiding us, who really should be those primary, have received those primary and those priority services, what is needed, and what are some of the tools and the administrative network tools that are needed to do the job. And so FirstNet continues to go reach out with public safety, me and my colleagues working across the country to work with what we're doing today. Oops. And so we have this partnership where you have the government, the network authority, which is overseeing the contract, which is making sure that it is that value added, just as public safety needs. You have AT&T, who was competed and was awarded the contract. It's a 25-year contract that's building this network. But in the middle is that partnership of public safety that's guiding it all. It's all about them. And so having that vision of having a dedicated, differentiated broadband communications being the whole mission is that catalyst, that FirstNet is that catalyst for advancing this network. So as we continue to go through with the network, part of it is that FirstNet Authority has, over the life of the contract, billions of dollars to reinvest how public safety needs to grow. And so what we've done is we've developed this roadmap. And the roadmap has its roots in public safety, saying that, hey, this is what we need. And when we went out and talked to public safety and conducted a series of surveys and workshops, it came in that there was 6 main categories that were important into this network, the domains, if you will. The core is we just need it to work. And the coverage and capacity is that it's got to have that coverage. It's got to be able to handle all those calls and emergencies, whether it's a single event or a compound event, and no, it's just a single agency, or if it's the worst case of 9/11. And then from there, the 4 domains of what are those, how do we use it? Having that situational awareness. Each one of what is situational awareness, you can see is, for example, the location services, the sensors, cameras, and videos. Also, we can see that voice communications is changing, being able to use mission critical push to talk. We have FirstNet now, we have that mission critical data. The network will continue to evolve with cutting edge technology so that to have that voice. Secure information, public safety needs to have that secure cybersecurity, unique security exchanges of the information. And having that user experience across the country, that whether you're in Salt Lake City, you're in New York, you're rural, you're urban, that it's all that same user experience with that priority of service. And so my colleagues and I work across the country to hear from public safety, working with different engagements so that we can get your advice, your opinion, your direction on how to spend those billions of dollars so that it goes into the network. And that money is not taxpayer money, it's not appropriated funding, it's not controlled by AT&T, it's the FirstNet authority that is then can be influenced by what your voice is. And so there's a lot of oversight into the contract and what we do in the field through whether we have an individual or an independent board of directors, we have congressional oversight, there's just multiple layers. And so that's a little bit about FirstNet Authority. We would love to talk with you. Please, there's my email. If you'd like to have your voice heard on your agency, we can come out and work with you in a roadmap engagement tailored to what you need, what you find is important. And thank you very much. Back to you, Martha.
Outstanding. Thank you guys so much. Those were extremely valuable presentations, and your perspective indeed was very helpful to paint the entire picture on where we stood here in Salt Lake and the support that we have with FirstNet with communications. So I'm going to move into some questions right now. And Tracey, since I've got you up, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the first one. You mentioned the oversight and everything, but I'm just wondering, how does FirstNet, the old AT&T, get evaluated by the authority?
Absolutely, thank you, Martha. So there's multiple layers of evaluation. It's a very rigorous process. We have a contracting officer, and she has several representatives that are making sure that those contractual benchmarks are met. And I can tell you that she is passionate about making sure that the accountability is there and that we are doing what is contractually required to do. We also have a network management office that verifies and validates every step of the way at that performance network, working with a team of engineers and in cooperation with that contracting officer. That's how we hold that FirstNet AT&T accountable. And I also want to add, Martha, that there's also oversight on FirstNet Authority, that we have congressional, in addition to the congressional oversight, we also have an independent board of directors that meets regularly, that's keeping their eye on what we're doing and the best way forward, because they too are a mix of public safety, industry, and as well as government officials. So lots of oversight on FirstNet. Thank you.
And a lot of the individuals that staff the board, including your advisory board, do they come from public safety backgrounds?
Yes, absolutely. All the people who work at FirstNet Authority all have that. For me, I was an emergency manager. In the board of directors, we have one right here in Paul Patrick from Utah that represents the EMS community. And so they are really speaking from their experience. They're guiding us from what they know, they've lived it. And so, yes, we also have a PSAC, which is a Public Safety Advisory Committee, which is made up of over 42 public safety specialists from all of the different disciplines, all the different agencies that represent public safety, and they're guiding us. They're saying, here's what we need. And of course, they're all listened to.
Excellent, thank you so much. All right, Garett, I'm gonna direct this question to you. During your presentation, you mentioned some of the ground laying efforts between FirstNet and the state of Utah. Do you feel like the efforts to work with at the state level emergency management in the state of Utah had a positive outcome in the Salt Lake City communications response for the earthquake specifically?
Yeah, I think it was really helpful by us going out and meeting beforehand and walking through the portal that Dave showed on the screen, and making sure that everyone was aware on how to do uplifts, how to request deployables. and just opening that communication is critical. I think Dave mentioned something that I would really agree. They talked about doing quarterly engagements on testing their EOC or standing it up, and those types of pre-planning just make the incident responses that much smoother, and I really do think it helped.
So I really like the idea of empowering those end users and those local teams, right, to be able to influence the effectiveness of their communications on that network and their oversight, like Dave mentioned as well, being able to monitor what's going on with the network. That is really unique to FirstNet, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we've given unprecedented access of being able to log into a portal, drill all the way down to the cell site level to see the health of the network and be able to empower that dispatch center, that EOC, to really understand what's going on with their communications. And then if they aren't getting what they need, giving them multiple mechanisms to engage, whether it's contacting FirstNet consultants locally, or calling into a national toll-free hotline, or using the FirstNet Assist app on their device, giving lots of different mechanisms for engagement.
Fantastic. Hey, I'm just kind of curious, in the throes of the last 3 months, has FirstNet realized any bump in adoption? Maybe people going over from their previous commercial networks over to the purpose-built network FirstNet during the pandemic?
Yes. We certainly have, largely driven out of the pandemic. We've had 450 different agencies either sign up for service or significantly expand the services that they are getting from FirstNet as a result of the pandemic and being ready to respond. So we are certainly busy, and if anybody does have interest on how their agency can participate, we'd certainly love to chat with them.
And those numbers are a deviation from what the regular trend was prior to this, correct?
Yes, and you can look at AT&T's quarterly report where we report our numbers, and you can see that there's been a significant uptick in overall subscriber adoption on FirstNet.
I'd like to think that that's a reflection of people finally being able to test these networks head to head in what I would call a redlined situation. It's easy to compare your networks when everything's static and you're in a pretty low mode of, regular day-to-day mode of response. But I think it's interesting to see that you guys are getting a bump, and I think it's favorable to FirstNet that you're getting a bump as people are finally seeing what these networks look like head to head in these really overtaxed and overburdened conditions. So thank you for that. Dave, I wanted to talk a moment about some of the things that you experienced and the data that you collected. And thank you, by the way, for your briefing. I'm kind of curious, do you have plans to review your broadband communications model within the city since this incident?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Basically, when I did the survey, I kind of looked at all of the communication methods that were employed by all of our EOC staff members. And basically, in cooperation with our emergency management group, there's an interest in working toward the standardization of communication technologies to the extent possible. That will be going on over the next 90 days.
Fantastic, thank you. Dustin, this question goes to you. Within the UFA emergency management structure, what are some of the key ways that you see UFA expanding their use of FirstNet broadband devices?
Yeah, thanks, Martha. Like Dave mentioned earlier, we've traditionally relied on our land mobile radios for a majority of our first responder communications, but like was mentioned, we gather so much situational awareness from video streaming, from internet feeds, from getting pictures, texts from responders, and some of those things that broadening our communications through some of those more frequently used ways of communication now is vitally important. I would say 90% of my communications between our operations BC that was at our dispatch center and myself was through text message. Now we had a radio channel opened up to communicate through, but still, even with that channel established, we were doing a majority of our communication through text. So it is important that we grow these systems within our organization to improve our communication abilities.
Fantastic. Hey, Garett, this one goes to you. How does a FirstNet subscriber get customer support? Is it through the regular AT&T customer service channel?
There is a specific FirstNet toll-free way to connect for support. They can sign up for services through retail or through their normal AT&T account manager, but there is a specific FirstNet customer support for whether it's a device-related issue or whether it's all the way to a deployable request. In addition, there is a FirstNet Assist application that is available through like an Android or an iOS app store. That is another way for them to get customer care and support.
Thank you. All right, another question that just came in. Dustin, somebody wants to know, do you guys utilize the push to talk at all yet on your FirstNet devices?
Yeah, we have not integrated that into our communications plan, and part of that is just that those devices are not widespread through our organization at this point, but we are working towards that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna read this question. Garett, I think you might be the best one to answer it. What type of emerging technologies, let's see, do you foresee changing broadband or, modern communications for public safety? So I guess the question is, how do you see broadband kind of changing the modern communications for public safety? And secondly, how can technologies be leveraged for public safety to communicate within communities where broadband communications are not readily available? So that might speak a little bit to the rest of our 5-year plan. Garett?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of new interesting use cases coming out. For example, we've been working with one partner on a temperature screening application where people going and entering a facility would, through a touchless mechanism, be able to have body temperature readings for screening coming out. I think this starts to speak to the IoT or the Internet of Things that we're starting to see emerge. We've seen some of this already with gunshot detection type applications, but we're seeing more and more devices that are getting internet and broadband enabled that will provide additional intelligence. I think Dustin mentioned the importance of body cameras and that type of video capture out in the field. We are definitely seeing that type of interest and type of use cases because they have a reliable broadband connection that is truly available to them.
Okay, sorry, you cut out for me a little bit.
Okay, well, hopefully you caught some of that.
I did. I'm sure it was just my end, Garett, but thank you for that answer. And when I listen to you speaking about this, I truly do believe that with the advent of FirstNet, that the innovation and the innovators are truly having the bit taken out of their mouths as far as, wow, the realm of possibilities are just as limited as our imaginations. And it's really up to the first responder to continually identify, well, what are the hurdles and the obstacles to making sure we can get our job done? And then let these app developers, these hardware developers, put it into play, because now we've got this network that can handle the rigors of data demands to allow those sort of things to come to fruition. So one of the questions is, if an agency is not using FirstNet, AT&T, and Garett, sorry, you're getting peppered with most of these, but uses Verizon or T-Mobile, can they roam over to a FirstNet or an AT&T device?
The FirstNet program is not set up like that. FirstNet was stood up and mandated by Congress to be a single network, and so at this time, that is not how it is structured or how it works. So in order to use the FirstNet capabilities, you need one of the FirstNet black SIMs into a FirstNet capable device.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we're coming close to the end, so what I would like to do is just run through our panel of presenters and just see if they have any closing comments or last thoughts as we get ready to conclude the webinar. So I will start with Dustin.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. Just like to thank the listeners today, and then and then also the association for the opportunity. It was a good discussion. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present the perspective of Salt Lake City Fire Department Emergency Services. It was great, and I very much appreciate it.
Garett?
I too would like to thank the association and the opportunity to share our story and to share our experiences through COVID-19, the earthquake, and we are just super proud and honored as AT&T to be a part of the FirstNet program and to be a part of this critical mission of communication with first responders.
All right, and Tracey?
Yeah, thank you, Martha, and thanks to the association for hosting this. It's just been a wonderful opportunity to get the word out and share our stories. And my final request would be I'd encourage all public safety agencies to share their opinion with FirstNet Authority. And we'd love to come and do a roadmap tailored discussion for your agency so that we can get your opinion in. Thank you.
Oh, and I apologize, Tracey, because for some reason you guys are cutting out on my end and I didn't mean to speak all over you. So again, thank you so much to our panelists. We hope that you all enjoyed our webinar today and felt it was time well spent. We really deeply appreciate your participation. Again, we are the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association, and we want to be your advocate for all aspects of FirstNet utilization. I would encourage you to become a member of our association for $75 a year. You can help support our efforts to continually bring you the cutting edge information about FirstNet, the nation's only fully designated mission critical first responder network, and all aspects of the ecosystem that are being purpose built to your advantage. We would also invite you to join us in Westminster, Colorado on September 28th through October 1st for our Vision 2020 FirstNet User Summit. We are optimistically continuing our preparations for the summit, keeping in mind considerations for social distancing and ongoing attention to cleanliness. Please visit our webpage at thepsbta.org for more information on the association, becoming a member, and our summit in September. Also, please consider visiting allthingsfirstnet.com. Their team continually compiles valuable information on FirstNet as well. This concludes our webinar on communications in complex incidents, Salt Lake earthquake COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you again for your time.